For decades, Windows has been the default computing experience for most people. It came pre-installed on laptops, it ran the software schools and offices demanded, and it shaped how an entire generation understood computers. File explorers, control panels, blue screens, endless update prompts, antivirus pop-ups, and that familiar desktop layout became normal. Linux, on the other hand, was treated like a strange alternative, something only programmers, hackers, or computer geniuses touched. It was whispered about in forums, shown briefly in tech YouTube videos, and usually dismissed with the same tired lines. It's hard to use, nothing works, you need to type commands for everything, and it's not ready for normal people. That perception used to be partially true. It is not true anymore. And that's the part Windows users aren't ready for. What Linux can do now feels almost unfair when you compare it to the experience most Windows users still accept as normal. Not because Linux is perfect, but because the gap between what people think Linux is and what it has become is massive. If you haven't seriously looked at Linux in the last 5 years, you are operating on outdated information. The Linux of today is fast, polished, user-friendly, powerful, and shockingly flexible. In many ways, it already lives in the future Windows keeps promising but never fully delivers. Start with the most basic expectation: installing an operating system. For Windows users, this is usually a stressful process involving license keys, account sign-ins, forced internet connections, hardware compatibility checks, and long update cycles before you can even use the system. Linux installation today is often easier. You download a single file, put it on a USB drive, boot from it, click through a friendly installer, and you're done. No product key, no forced account, no ads, no nagging to subscribe to anything. In many Linux distributions, you can try the entire system live before installing it, using your mouse, keyboard, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and graphics card without touching your existing setup. That alone feels like a different philosophy. Linux doesn't assume it owns your machine. It asks permission. Once installed, the difference becomes even more obvious. A fresh Linux desktop boots faster, uses less memory, and feels responsive even on older hardware. Machines that struggle to run modern versions of Windows suddenly feel alive again. Fans spin less, battery life improves. The system isn't constantly doing mysterious background tasks. There is no sudden slowdown because an update decided to run at the worst possible time. Linux gives you control over when and how things happen, and that control translates directly into performance. Then there's the desktop itself. Windows users often assume Linux desktops are ugly, outdated, or awkward. That stereotype hasn't survived reality. Modern Linux desktops can look sleek, minimal, futuristic, or familiar depending on what you choose. You can make it resemble Windows closely, or macOS, or something entirely unique. Animations are smooth, fonts are crisp, dark modes are consistent. Window management is smarter. Virtual desktops actually feel useful instead of tacked on. You're not locked into one vision designed by a corporation trying to maximize engagement metrics. You shape the experience around how you work. Software availability is another area where Windows users are often unprepared for the truth. The old argument was that Linux has no apps. Today, Linux has more software than most people will ever need, and it installs in a way that feels almost magical compared to Windows. Instead of hunting through websites, dodging fake download buttons, and hoping you don't install malware, Linux uses centralized software stores and package managers. You search for what you want, click install, and it just works. Updates for your entire system, including apps and drivers, arrive in one place. One update process, one restart, if any. No separate updaters running in the background for every application, and the apps themselves are better than most Windows users expect. Browsers, office suites, video editors, photo editors, music players, chat apps, development tools, and even professional software all exist and work well. LibreOffice handles documents with ease. Firefox and Chrome run flawlessly. Blender, which powers serious 3D work and Hollywood productions, is native and optimized. DaVinci Resolve runs on Linux. Steam supports Linux directly, and gaming has reached a point where many Windows-only titles run as well, or better, on Linux, thanks to compatibility layers like Proton. That alone would have sounded impossible 10 years ago. Gaming deserves special attention. Because it's one of the biggest reasons Windows users avoid Linux. The truth is that Linux gaming has quietly crossed a critical threshold. Thousands of games run out of the box. Many AAA titles perform competitively. Controllers work. Online multiplayer works. Anti-cheat support has improved dramatically. Steam Deck, a Linux-based gaming device, proved to the industry that Linux can handle modern gaming at scale. When a major gaming company ships a Linux system to millions of users and it succeeds, the conversation changes. Windows users who still think Linux can't game are living in the past. Security is another area where Linux operates on a level Windows users rarely experience. Linux systems are fundamentally designed with security in mind. Permissions are strict. System files are protected. Malware targeting Linux desktops is rare, not because Linux is obscure, but because its architecture makes large-scale exploitation harder. You don't need third-party antivirus software constantly scanning your files and slowing your system down. Updates patch vulnerabilities quickly. The open-source nature of Linux means issues are visible, discussed, and fixed in the open instead of hidden behind corporate walls. Privacy is where Linux truly breaks Windows users' expectations. Modern Windows collects a staggering amount of data by default. Telemetry, usage, statistics, advertising IDs, and cloud integration are deeply baked into the system. You can reduce it, but you can't fully escape it. Linux, by contrast, doesn't spy on you. There is no default data harvesting, no behavioral tracking, no forced online accounts tied to your operating system. Your computer feels like it belongs to you again, not to a company monetizing your activity. Customization goes beyond appearance and into workflow. Linux allows you to reshape how you interact with your computer at a fundamental level. Keyboard-driven workflows, tiling window managers, automated scripts, and system-wide shortcuts let you work faster and with less friction. You can change how notifications behave, how windows snap, how the system handles power, how files are indexed, and how resources are allocated. On Windows, many of these things are locked down or require risky registry edits and third-party tools. On Linux, they are first-class features. One of the most shocking differences for Windows users is how Linux treats updates. On Windows, updates are something you endure. They interrupt your work, restart your system, change settings without asking, and sometimes break things. On Linux, updates are predictable and respectful. You choose when to apply them. You can see exactly what is being updated. You can roll back changes if something goes wrong. In many cases, you don't even need to restart. The system doesn't treat you like an obstacle to be managed. Stability is another quiet strength. Linux systems can run for months or years without needing a reboot. Servers rely on Linux for this reason, but the same stability applies to desktops. Crashes are rare. When something does go wrong, logs are available, errors are readable, and fixes are searchable. You're not greeted with vague error codes and generic messages telling you something failed. The system respects your intelligence instead of hiding behind abstraction. For creators and developers, Linux feels like home in a way Windows often doesn't. Development tools are native. Programming languages, compilers and libraries install cleanly. Containers, virtual machines, and servers behave exactly as they will in production environments. Web developers, data scientists, and engineers can work without fighting their operating system. This is one of the reasons so much of the modern internet runs on Linux. Windows users who switch often describe it as a sense of relief, like friction they didn't realize existed suddenly disappears. Even for non-technical users, Linux has matured. Printers work, Wi-Fi works, Bluetooth works. Touchpads support gestures. High DPI displays scale correctly. Multi-monitor setups are reliable. These were once weak points, but they've been steadily refined. The experience is no longer about tinkering just to make basic things function. You can install Linux and use it productively the same day without touching a terminal, unless you want to, and that's the key difference. Linux doesn't force you to be technical, but it allows you to be. Windows often blocks advanced users, while overwhelming beginners with clutter. Linux adapts to the user, instead of trying to funnel everyone into the same experience. If you want simplicity, it gives you that. If you want power, it gives you that too. Another thing Windows users aren't ready for is how lightweight Linux can be. You can install a fully functional Linux system that uses a fraction of the disk space Windows requires. No pre-installed games you didn't ask for. No trial software. No ads in the start menu. No constant reminders to buy upgrades. The system starts clean and stays clean unless you choose otherwise. That sense of control is addictive once you experience it. Linux also respects older hardware in a way Windows no longer does. Perfectly usable machines are abandoned by Windows due to arbitrary hardware requirements. Linux doesn't care. It will run on machines that Windows left behind years ago. Schools, businesses, and individuals around the world use Linux to extend the life of hardware that would otherwise become electronic waste. That's not just efficient, it's responsible. Then there's the community aspect. Linux is built by people who care deeply about their tools. Documentation is abundant. Forums are active. Solutions are shared freely. You're not at the mercy of a single company's support system or business decisions. If one project disappears, another replaces it. The ecosystem is resilient in a way proprietary platforms can't match. Windows users often ask why they would switch if Windows works fine. The answer isn't that Linux is for everyone, but that many people don't realize how much they've normalized inconvenience. They accept slowdowns, forced changes, privacy trade-offs, and lack of control because they assume there is no alternative. Linux challenges that assumption directly. It shows that an operating system can be fast without being invasive, powerful without being bloated, and flexible without being hostile to users. What really catches Windows users off guard is how quickly Linux feels normal. The fear fades within days. The habits adapt. The workflow improves. And then, when you go back to Windows, the contrast becomes impossible to ignore. The ads feel intrusive. The updates feel aggressive. The system feels heavy. It's not that Linux is perfect. It's that it respects you in ways Windows stopped prioritizing. Linux today is not an experiment. It's not a niche toy. It runs phones, servers, cars, smart devices, supercomputers, and game consoles. It quietly powers the infrastructure of the modern world. The desktop is simply catching up to what Linux has always been capable of. And now that it has, Windows users are standing at the edge of a realization they weren't prepared for. The alternative they dismissed has grown up, matured, and in many areas, surpassed what they thought was the default. The question is no longer whether Linux is ready for normal users. The real question is whether Windows users are ready to let go of the idea that they don't have a choice. Because once you see what Linux can do now, it becomes very hard to unsee it.